Hello everybody, welcome to our Unit 7. This Unit 7 talks about entrepreneurial trends. And so in this lesson 7.1, we're going to start with types of business entities. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So first off, though, let's look at some of the components of starting a business. So if you are doing a startup is a recently launched business endeavor or organization. And some things that you need to consider when starting your own business are things like your product and service. What are you offering? What is your market? What is your legal structure? What is the scale? How are you going to grow your business? What permits do you need? What licenses do you need? And who is your target audience? So those are some things to beginning to consider, but now let's talk about some of the business entities and understanding what business entities are. Now, business entities, these are the legal structures that determine how a business is organized, owned, and operated. And so you've got first off is a sole proprietorship, and next is a partnership. And then there is the limited liability company, or an LLC. You also have a corporation. You can have a C corporation, or you can have what's called an S corporation. And so we're going to talk about each one of these individually, starting off with a sole proprietorship. So the definition of a sole proprietorship, this is the simplest form of a business entity. This is owned and operated by a single individual or a sole proprietor. As a sole proprietor, you have full control. You assume all responsibilities and all liabilities for your business. There is no legal separation between personal and business assets and liabilities. Now, some of the features of a sole proprietorship are that it's easy to set up. There's minimal regulatory requirements, and you have direct control and retention of all the profits of your business. Now, on the other hand, some responsibilities for a sole proprietorship include that you are personally responsible for any legal obligations or debts. And as far as registration, you have to apply for a business license with the appropriate government agency. Now, an example of a sole proprietorship is simply a freelance graphic designer running a design studio. Next is a limited liability company, or an LLC. This is a unique business structure combining benefits of a corporation and a partnership. It offers limited liability protection to its members, and you have their flexibility in management and taxation. Some of the features include that you maintain a distinct legal identity from your personal business, and members are shielded from personal liability from company debts. You can also opt for partnership taxation. So an example of an LLC is a group of friends starting a small restaurant with shared ownership and limited liability. Next are corporations. Again, C corporations and S corporations. But a corporation basically is a formal, legally recognized business structure that is separate from the shareholders, and it provides limited liability protection and also allows for easy transfer of ownership and existence of multiple owners. Some of the features of a corporation include the ability to issue shares of stock and attract investors and raise capital. And there is a requirement for regular shareholder meetings, and you have to keep formal records. You may be subject to double taxation with a corporation. An example of a corporation is like a multinational technology company like Apple or Microsoft. These are corporations. All right, before we get too much further, let's talk about some considerations when you're starting a small business. Things that you have to consider, things you have to look at when you're doing a small business. So starting off with business idea and market analysis. This is basically evaluating the viability and potential of a business idea and understanding your target market. For example, you can conduct market research to determine the demand for a new organic food delivery service. That's just an example. Next, you have to consider financing options and budgeting. Okay, you've got to assess your available funding sources and create a financial plan to manage your expenses and your revenue. So an example would be exploring options such as loans, grants, personal savings, and developing a budget for a small IT consultancy. That's an example. Next thing to consider would be legal and regulatory requirements. This is understanding and complying with the legal obligations and regulations related to licenses, permits, taxes, and other legal considerations. An example would be researching the specific licenses and permits required to operate a restaurant, including health and safety regulations. Next is business plan development. This is developing a comprehensive plan outlining the business and marketing goals and strategies to achieve those goals, as well as your financial projections. So an example of this would be drafting a business plan that includes your detailed marketing strategies, your financial forecasts, and operational details for a startup bakery. Something else to consider would be marketing and branding strategies. Okay, you've got to plan promotional activities and establish a strong brand identity to attract your customers. An example would be developing a social media marketing campaign and designing a logo and a visual identity for a boutique clothing store. Operations and resources. This is determining the necessary resources, infrastructure, and operational processes needed to run the business. For example, you want to analyze how much land, labor, and capital a business needs, considering brick and mortar versus online business models for selling your products. Next is your type of goods. Consumer goods are products that are intended for personal use by individual consumers. Industrial goods are used by businesses or organizations for production, operations, and or further processing purposes. An example would be determining the packaging for silverware used in restaurants compared to silverware used in private residences. Next is, and last, is our target audience and your competition. You've got to identify the specific group of customers that your business aims to serve and understand your competitive landscape. An example would be analyzing existing fitness studios in the area and defining a unique selling proposition if you're starting a new yoga studio. All right, and so that is our lesson 7.1 of entrepreneurial trends, talking about the components and the considerations of starting a small business or business and the types of business entities.